Writing questions is an incredibly important skill that many students lack. In fact, I've looked at studies, I can't quite cite it, but I've looked at studies that have shown that student curiosity drops off in middle school. So while they're very curious in elementary school, students tend to become less and less curious as they get into secondary. So we need to give that back to them, especially if they are going to be leaders in a Socratic seminar or other discussions in which they will need to ask questions of their peers in order to keep the discussion building. So this is one technique called the QFT, the Question Formulation Technique, and this comes from the Right Question Institute. I've just adapted it here to make it so that it's a ready-to-use lesson plan that you can pop into your slides and use today if you wanted to. This is something that I actually used in a teacher's classroom not too long ago, and it seemed to go pretty well. I'll show you the model in just a moment. So the basic rundown is you need to have a question focus. So the teacher comes up with this. What is the stimulus or the springboard that you want to use in order for students to begin generating their questions? Okay, so what is the major topic, in other words, of your discussion? Okay, and then I asked this question, why are questions important, and got students to do some thinking around that beforehand, before we really dove in. So here are the rules for QFT. Students are supposed to ask as many questions as they can. Generally speaking, they do this in writing, like they're planning their questions first. Okay, so they're asking as many questions as they can within a given set of time that you provide. They are not supposed to stop, judge, discuss, or answer any of the questions. They just keep, I wonder about this, and I'm thinking about this, and I wonder about this and that. And they just keep going, okay? They write down every question exactly as it's thought of or exactly as it's stated. So this is not the time to go back and critique and be thinking, oh, that was a crappy question. I don't like that one. No, they're supposed to just keep going. And then if they have statements that they write out rather than questions, they can change those into the form of a question. Alrighty? That's something they can also do during the revision phase, though, if they wish. So students produce as many questions as they possibly can in relation to this QFT, this question focus, all the stuff, okay? So all kinds of questions that come to mind, they want to go ahead and get them down. They need to follow the rules that were just provided. Now, in my demonstration with this class, I provided a couple of options for us to try out. Okay, so I was trying to think of things that would be appealing or things that would be pretty accessible to a group of juniors or seniors. And so here they are. And then I provided a model of how to engage in the QFT. So when I first started, this is what it looked like. This is what the model looked like. It was very basic. Obviously just 3 rows here, one for generating questions, one for refining questions, and then another for questions that I heard from other people that I want to steal and maybe adapt or borrow. Okay, so that comes later when you're sharing. This part here is what I focused on for the model, where I went ahead and based on the topic that the students chose, I entered it here. I think one of them was self-driving cars for one of the periods. So I entered it here, and then I just started, once the timer was set and I went, just started generating questions. And then also students started throwing some into the back channel chat, which was pretty awesome. And I was grabbing some of those and pasting them in as well. I highly recommend doing a model when you do the QFT for the first time, just because many students, as I said, they lack that natural ability to be creative and to be curious. That's something that is somehow lost after elementary school. So we want to make sure that we show students, here's how to get curious. So then with the Q focus, all right, then I had students say, okay, well, for the Q focus that they were working on in class, I think for this particular class, they were supposed to interview a mentor. So they were generating questions for the purpose of using them during the interview that they were going to hold. So they would say what their own Q focus was. So if you're using this deck of slides and you really like it, this is where you would put in your Q focus for your class to work on. Obviously, if you're about to hold a Socratic seminar or some other form of discussion, you want to make sure to put in that Q focus here so that students can keep looking back to the screen and going, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be writing questions to, okay? And then you give them their own document to generate their questions in. I decided on a 7-minute timer because sometimes students, especially when they're first doing this, they lack some stamina. If they need more time, you can always extend it and give it to them. Then their next step is they go ahead and they improve their questions. So they go ahead and they review their list and they think about which ones are closed and which ones are opened. And here are some definitions of what closed and opened questions are. All right. Closed is like there's one set answer. Open-ended, there's a variety of ways in which the question can be answered. Obviously, for a discussion, for the most part, we are digging into those open-ended questions. That's where we want students to land. And that's what we really want students to learn is how do you write a really good open-ended question that you can ask your peers to then keep this discussion going and make it really interesting for everybody. Improving the questions. They can go back and they can revise. Now on this, that's where this green row is for, refining my questions. So if there's some that came out kind of crummy in the initial generation of questions with the timer, they can go ahead and refine them here and make them a little bit better. Then, after practice changing questions from one type to another. So if you have a bunch of closed type questions, students could then try to make them more open-ended. And you could talk about and demonstrate, well, what about this question? Can someone share one with me that they're pretty sure is a closed question? Hey, class, let's think about how could we make this into an open-ended question, and vice versa. All right, it's just interesting food for thought. It's a good challenge for students. And then as a class, what are a couple of questions that you came up with that might work well for other students? I mean, sharing is caring. We encourage borrowing, right? Because we know that in the space of a classroom discussion, not all questions will get asked, but there might be some that are super good or that other students might like to borrow and try out and adapt on their own. So it's definitely worth sharing out that. And then prioritizing questions. You'll now choose 3 questions you might like to ask. So this helps students to narrow it down. Like, what are my top 2 or my top 3 that I think would really work best for this class discussion? These are the ones that I really want to hold on to so that if there's a lull or a pause, maybe I'd like to throw one in to get the discussion going again. So another step that's important too is having students anticipate what kind of responses they'll get. And this is often something that's like a big epiphany for students. They go, whoa, wait a second. Oh, so a student could answer it this way. They could answer it that way. Maybe they'd think about this other thing. All right. And then also tell your students they need to be ready to rephrase or repeat questions if they encounter silence after asking. They shouldn't just give up. They should say, okay, well, let me try to rephrase that for you. Or can I repeat this? And oftentimes other students will really appreciate that because sometimes they didn't quite get it the first go round. All right. And then this is just a reflection you can do with your class after your first go round of the QFT. Let me show you the model, the results of the model that I did with that one class. Oh, well, this one was on college costs. And so here's me generating my questions, blah, 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 blah. Then I had students go in and highlight questions that they liked, that they thought, yes, I like this question. This is what I would prioritize if I were you, Ms. Shapiro. So they went ahead and they prioritized some for me. And then I started to refine and then kind of let them go more on their own. So we did not finish up that model. So anyway, I hope that helps to explain what the QFT is and how you might be able to use it. I will make sure to insert the link for both this slide deck and for this document should you want to use it.